This is Marina Jenkins, Executive Director of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee, and this is Drawing the Line, a podcast about the maps that shape our democracy and what it takes to make sure every vote counts. Today we're talking all about Texas. Recently, it was reported that the Trump White House is pressuring Texas lawmakers to draw a congressional map that is even more gerrymandered than their current map. Their current map is already being challenged, and a trial is just concluding to determine whether that map violates the Voting Rights Act, among other challenges, because it diminishes the voting power of the state's fast-growing Latino population. This is really important. Texas is a big state. We all know the joke, everything's bigger in Texas. The congressional map is bigger in Texas. The litigation is also bigger in Texas, as we've discussed. But Texas is continuing to grow, and projections from last December showed that Texas could gain up to 4 additional congressional seats after the 2030 census. So this state is just such an important place for our focus to make sure that representation is fair and equal, because it makes a big difference in Texas, but it also makes a big difference for the U.S. House of Representatives and the overall representation of Americans in Congress. As I noted, there is a trial that is just about wrapping up down in Texas, in El Paso, in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Texas. That court has been hearing a case called League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC, versus Abbott. LULAC v. Abbott is a case that consolidated a number of different claims from a number of different plaintiff groups into one case. Our affiliate, the National Redistricting Foundation, is supporting a group of voters called the Gonzalez plaintiffs in that case. And the Gonzalez plaintiffs are arguing that the district maps discriminate against Black and Latino voters, and more specifically, that the Republican majority legislature in Texas in 2021 deliberately drew its congressional and state House and Senate districts in a way that split up voters of color to dilute their political power. The testimony from state lawmakers, as well as plaintiffs, voters in Texas who are trying to rectify their equal voting rights, has been ongoing for the past few weeks, and a number of different witnesses have talked about the potential for fair maps in Texas and what that should look like. One of the experts for the Gonzalez team, for example, walked through a congressional map that would add 2 new Latino opportunity districts, one in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and one in the Harris County area. Now, making sure there is equal access in Texas is important because of what we saw happen after the 2020 census and in the 2021 redistricting. Despite the fact that Texas's growth was almost entirely due to the growth in the population of communities of color, the state drew a new map in 2021 that actually increased the number of majority white districts. That does not reflect what we learned from the census data in 2020 and does not allow for fair representation. It's quite clear that Texas's map denies Latino voters an equal opportunity to participate in the political process and to elect candidates of their choice. We have already seen that. We are working on proving that in court. And now what we're hearing from the Trump administration is they want even more. They want even more from the Texas legislature. They want an even more gerrymandered map. They want even more voter suppression. They want to lock in power in the U.S. House of Representatives that is not actually real. And they don't think they can win fairly, so they have to cheat. Gerrymandering is cheating. That being said, the Texas legislature recently ended its legislative session. The legislative session adjourned on Tuesday, June 3rd. So if Texas lawmakers were to go back and try and draw a new map, that would have to be done in a special session that would have to be called by the governor who's already the defendant, Abbott, in the litigation, LULAC v. Abbott. Whether or not we will actually see this happen, we don't know, but it is really, really important for us to keep the pressure on the state of Texas to make sure not only that they create a map that is more fair, but that they don't actually try to move backwards and create an even more gerrymandered map that dilutes and manipulates the power of voters in their state. Thankfully, as the Texas legislature adjourned its session, we were able to see the putting aside of some really bad bills that were moving through the state legislature throughout this session. There were two bad bills in particular that were moving through Texas, SB 16 and HB 5337. These bills were modeled after an Arizona law that requires proof of citizenship to vote in state and local elections. The Texas bills would have also barred voters who don't provide citizenship proof from voting in presidential elections. These bills are echoes of what we're seeing in the SAVE Act at the federal level, which is just trying to increase the burden on voting for everybody, purportedly under the guise of trying to stop non-citizens who are already not allowed to vote from voting. This is boogeyman, and thankfully, those bills did not succeed in Texas during this session, but we're still keeping our eye on them. We're seeing those kinds of efforts in other states as well. Gerrymandered states like Ohio and Arizona have put forth similar bills. As noted, one of those bills in Texas was actually modeled off of legislation in Arizona. So these ideas are percolating, and these bad bills are, being moved from state to state, and that the effort is being pushed across the country. For example, two bills in Ohio are moving that would be bad for voters, elections, and election officials. SB 153 and HB 233, if passed, would make collecting petition signatures harder, make registering to vote much harder, ban election drop boxes, make getting issues and candidates on the ballot much harder, increase ballot rejections, and make election officials' jobs much harder. There's a trend here. We can see that where Republicans don't want to have to actually face voters and what voters want, they simply try to change the rules so that they don't have to listen to you. That is what they're doing. So Texas is going to continue to be a very important state for folks to get involved in, keep an eye out, keep up the pressure. The fact that we're seeing this pressure from the White House, from Trump himself into Texas to seek a more gerrymandered map so that he can lock in control of Congress and not have to answer to the people, that's also going to happen in other states. So we're keeping our eyes on Texas, and we're keeping our eyes out across the country for other states that might be having some of the same pressure being put on them by the Trump administration. So stay tuned. We'll have more news later this month. We're going to be releasing our electoral priorities for 2025 and 26. We're going to be tracking what's happening at the Supreme Court as the term comes to an end and decisions are going to be coming down week after week over the next few weeks. There's going to be a lot happening. So we're going to keep you up to date. We're going to stay with you. Please stay with us. This is incredibly important to track also because of everything else that's happening with the Trump administration. All of this effort and this pressure from the Trump administration is incredibly scary, also in the context of what's happening across the country. We're seeing the Trump administration push back against citizens who are simply using their voices, exercising their First Amendment rights to voice their concern and opposition to what the administration is doing. So this ties together because when you think about what is gerrymandering, why do we need to worry about it? We need to worry about it because what it is a way for powerful people already in power to squelch, to crush, to shut up the people who don't agree with them. So if you have a gerrymandered map in Texas where instead of having the right number of people that should be represented and voice an opinion for what they believe, you can just pretend that those people don't exist. They artificially manipulate representation so that their voices are louder and they seem to have more power even when they don't. That's not how our democracy is supposed to work. And so, just as the Trump administration is trying to crush the vocal opposition to what they're doing in California right now, in Texas, they're trying to crush the opposition of anybody that might vote against them in 2026. And again, this is all about you. This is all about your power, your voice. And that's why it's so important. Because if we can allow politicians already in power to keep that power, whether or not that's what people vote for, we're going to be in a really, really scary place. And the midterms are an incredibly important moment for us to stand up as a country and push back against what's happening at the federal level. I anticipate we're going to be seeing the same kind of pressure that Trump is putting on Texas being put in other states. New Hampshire is one state where we've already seen some rumblings about mid-decade redistricting. Georgia is another state last decade that kept trying to redraw its districts because the Republicans were not always winning. And so, we're keeping our eyes open. We're following all of this. We will keep you all informed as we go. But, it's just really a scary moment. And this is the attempt to gerrymander in Texas is just a piece of what's happening. And it's all the same authoritarian playbook that Trump is playing across the country. If you like our show, please follow us on YouTube and Instagram at Dem Redistrict, or visit our website at democraticredistricting.com. Thanks so much for listening.
This show is produced by Reed Dudley, Sophia Pedroso, and Manuel Marce. Special thanks to Alex Yang. Editing and mixing by Play Pretend Media. This podcast is paid for by the National Democratic Redistricting Committee.